Good day, guys, and welcome back. Once again, this is Glenn Pajares, and today I'll be talking about Friedrich Nietzsche's concept of the will to power, or the will to power in the philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche. So, what is the will to power? In my interpretation, the will to power is an eternal concept in the philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche. And it is an irrational, pre-rational, unconscious force found in the universe. In other words, the entire universe is the will to power, or the world is the will to power. So it is the principle of being. In other words, will to power is being. It is the essence and existence of the whole of reality, encompassing both the living and the non-living thing. That is why, for me, the will to power is basically an ontological principle or a metaphysical principle according to Friedrich Nietzsche. It is the essence of the world. It is the meaning and nature of the entire universe. So basically, it's a principle, it's a cause, it's the essence, the form of anything that is living and non-living. So others would translate it as a force or an energy. It's like the quarks and atoms of the entire universe. It is the principle of creation because all things come from or proceed from the will to power. And it is also the principle and cause of destruction. Things are destroyed or things decay because of the lack of will to power, or the will to power itself is responsible for the decay of things. So the whole of creation, the whole of the degeneration and corruption of things, the principle and cause behind it is the will to power. So it's the cause of all causes, the principle of all principles, the beginning and the end of the universe. So by nature, it is infinite, it is eternal, it is thriving, increasing in power, and it is absolute and it is real for Friedrich Nietzsche. Aside from being a metaphysical or ontological principle, the will to power is also understood as a psychological principle. In other words, it is the soul of all life, the principle of life. So where there is life, there is the will to power. So the will to power is the source of life, the cause of life, the fount of life. Basically, it's a fundamental desire. It is an appetite, a motivation, a passion, an instinct, a concupiscence, or an inclination of everything that is living. So because it is will, it is responsible of motion, responsible of making things capable of movement, of thriving. So it is a longing, it's an urge, it's a hunger and a thirst for power. So others would say it's the feeling of power. It is the wanting for power. It is the overflow of power. It is a drive, it is a motivation for love, for survival, to excel, to achieve, to dominate, to win, to be on top of things, to abhor failure and defeat, and not to lag behind. So people, all living things, whether it's a plant or animal or human being, are driven by this life force called the will to power. And this is the very reason why we compete with one another, why other people tend to manipulate others, to control others. This is also the reason why we endure challenges and problems, or surmount them, or become resilient. Basically, the will to power is also a drive for self-overcoming, or the passion for self-mastery, to make the human person unceasingly striving to become better, if not the best of himself or herself. So it drives every person to be the best version of ourselves. In other words, it is the impetus of self-actualization, of nurturing, of development, So that's what will to power is as a psychological principle, or as the principle of life, the life force. Then the will to power is also a biological principle. So some other people would consider it as the will to live or the will to survive, but for Nietzsche, it's actually more than that. But basically, that's the reason why people procreate, why people want to live long, why people want to be immortal. So it's the principle of nutrition. And we see nutrition in all forms of living beings, whether it's a plant, an animal, or a human being. It's the cause of sensation among animals, and it's even the cause of reason. So for Friedrich Nietzsche, the will is the source of everything. Even reason is merely a product of the will to power. So the will to power needs to create reason for a certain benefit and advantage to be able to develop itself and actualize itself in order to gain more power and to expand power, dominion, and control. So that's why reason has to be created by the will to power. So reason has to lead the organism, not just to survive, not just to live long, but also to master oneself and to defend oneself from others. It is also that drive for predators to capture their prey and to outsmart them. So it is the drive or motivation to be the king of the jungle, to be the top of the food chain. It drives organism to procreate, to assimilate, to adapt, to camouflage itself, and the natural desire to be immortal, the wanting to live longer, the wanting to live all over again. That is why the concept of eternal recurrence, that is actually a consequence of the will to power. So people are motivated to repeat their lives eternally all over again because the will to power is able to affirm itself, to affirm the beauty of life, to affirm fate, to affirm destiny, even the hardships of life. So that's the will to power as a biological principle. So now we ask, where did Nietzsche get the idea of the will to power? A lot of commentators and interpreters would say that since Nietzsche was a lover of anything Greek, he was a philologist, he was madly in love with the Greek language, Greek literature, and Greek philosophy, of course, not Socrates and Plato, but he idolized the Greek gods, especially Dionysus or Dionysius or whatever, how you pronounce it, who is the god of dark arts. So he represents what? Fertility, sexuality, frenzy. So that's the origin of the will to power. So the Greeks, especially the Dionysian principle, inspired Nietzsche to conceptualize or arrive at that concept called the will to power. Many interpreters and commentators also said that Nietzsche's will to power is influenced by Arthur Schopenhauer, whom Nietzsche read and encountered while he was in the university. So Arthur Schopenhauer was talking, I think, of the will to live, but the will to live of Schopenhauer was a little bit, or I would say, it was pessimistic. It was very negative because Schopenhauer thought that to minimize the will to live, man is able to get out of suffering and misery of life through art. But Nietzsche did not think of it that way. The will is something positive, something good, something beneficial to man. In fact, it's the will to power that enables man to find meaning even in the most meaningless of situations. It is the will to power that gives man strength and inspiration and hope and optimism in times of darkness, when one is surmounted by so many problems and challenges in life. So by the will to power, man is able to say that life is good, to embrace life in both its goodness and difficulties and, I would say, badness. So that's the will to power. So it is something positive, not something negative. And this is Nietzsche's the will to power. And aside from that, many commentators also and interpreters would say that Nietzsche was influenced by the evolutionists of his time, some natural scientists and biologists who were critiques of Charles Darwin's concept of evolution. So they say that Nietzsche's will to power was actually a criticism of Charles Darwin's concept of survival of the fittest or natural selection. And Nietzsche's will to power as the source of values, as a source of meaning in life, as a source of strength, as a source of progress and development, it's not really something negative, because others would say that the will to power tends to be cruel instead of being kind. On the contrary, the way I interpret Nietzsche, even the Superman, who is the embodiment of the will to power, or the will to power made flesh, or the summit or epitome of the will to power, the one who manifests the will to power, also loves, also does good things, virtuous things, beneficial things such as kindness and love. And according to Nietzsche, the Superman, the embodiment of the will to power, loves not because he's weak, but love is the excess. Love is the diffusion of the will to power. Even kindness, the Ubermensch can be kind. And that kindness is the overflow of the will to power. So I hope you learned something today. Thank you for watching and listening. Please click like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And kindly give comments in order to improve our future videos and episodes.